Hello and welcome to another one of our videos. We've created a lexicon of very useful terms connected directly to ancient Egypt in order to shed some light on more complicated or lesser-known expressions. Let's get right to it. Abusir Papyri is the biggest collection of papyrus ever found and dates back to the 5th dynasty, about the 24th century BCE, during the Old Kingdom period. The first piece was discovered in 1893 at Abu Ghorab, near Abusir. All pieces of papyrus introduce two kinds of writing, hieroglyphic and hieratic. These fragments of Egyptian history contain details of running the royal mortuary temple, duty lists for priests, temple's inventory check, and offerings lists. The papyri were found in Pharaoh's temple complexes, which belonged to Neferefre Kakai, the third king of the 5th dynasty, Neferefre king, and most likely the oldest son of Neferefre Kakai and Khentkaus II, an Egyptian royal woman, wife of Neferefre Kakai, and a mother to Neferefre. All temples mentioned above were built in or near Abusir, an elaborate burial area in ancient Egypt with 19 pyramids and many other temples. Abydos is considered one of the most important archaeological sites of ancient Egypt. Back then, it used to be a sacred city, a center of worship of god Osiris, and a necropolis for many kings. It was initially known as a burial site for pharaohs from the 1st and 2nd dynasty. The situation changed in the 1970s, when further archaeological excavations proved the presence of many other tombs, older than those built after Egypt's unification. Inside these tombs, excavators found intact pottery, royal emblems, ivory labels, and the names of several pre-dynastic kings. The before-mentioned labels taught historians that Egyptian writing reached an advanced level much earlier than it was generally recognized. Abydos served also as a center of cult for deified kings of ancient Egypt. An amulet is a small object in the shape of a hieroglyph, animal, god, eye, or other body parts worn in ancient Egypt like normal jewelry. It was believed they had the power to protect from evil, and in that spirit, they were often placed between the bandages of mummies. Amulets were very important for Egyptians, and they invoked the power of gods and other magical forces. The oldest charm dates back to 4400 years BCE. The materials used to make amulets varied, depending on the social class of the owner. Egyptians believed in the protective and regenerative powers of their amulets and used them not only during rituals but in everyday life as well. Ankh is an ancient Egyptian symbol for life. It dates back to the 1st dynasty around the 30th to 29th century BCE and looks like a cross with a teardrop-shaped loop on the top. It looks very much like a special kind of a key, which explains another name for this symbol, the key of life. Ankh was present in Egyptian art and architecture. As a very important sign to Egyptians, it shows also on tombs and very often depictions of gods. There's a theory suggesting that Ankh symbolized a key opening door to the afterlife. Bennu Bird is a mythical bird in ancient Egyptian religion, often associated with creation, rebirth, and the sun. It is frequently compared to the Greek phoenix, as both are connected to cyclical regeneration. The Bennu bird symbolized life, death, and resurrection. In mythology, the Bennu bird was linked to Ra and the cycle of the sun's daily renewal. It was believed to have played a role in the creation of the world, emerging from the waters of chaos to land on the Benben stone, which was a sacred stone in the temple of Ra at Heliopolis. The Bennu was also associated with the soul and eternity, a powerful symbol of the continuity of life and death in Egyptian thought. Book of the Dead is probably the world's best-known collection of funerary incantations and spells from ancient Egypt. The writings come from Coffin Texts and the earlier version of these, pyramid texts. With time, many colorful illustrations and hymns to the sun god Ra were included as well. Book of the Dead wasn't a creation of one author. It's been regularly rewritten and updated by many Egyptian scribes, who then were selling papyri full of writings to common people wanting to help themselves in their journey to the afterlife. Egyptologists found many copies of Book of the Dead's fragments in ancient tombs. According to these findings, people were choosing spells they believed to be most vital in getting to the afterlife. There are about 200 chapters of the book that we know about. Book of the Dead's modern name is The Chapters of Coming Forth by Day, and it came from Carl Richard Lepsius, a German Egyptologist, responsible for the first ever publication of the book in 1842. Book of Two Ways is the graphical representation of Coffin Texts and the first ancient Egyptian map of the Netherworld. Known also as the Guide to the Ways of Rostau, Book of Two Ways was found depicted on few coffins from the Middle Egyptian necropolis in Deir el-Bersha. The two ways are zigzagged paths, separated by a lake of fire, which can not only destroy but has reviving powers as well. The journey is very dangerous, full of demonic creatures, guardians and other obstacles one must face, such as darkness or walls of stone and fire. Many additional paths cross each other or lead to nowhere. The departed hopes to get to Rostau, realm of Osiris, where his body lies. According to the myth, anyone who looks at the body will never die. Deceased anticipates also reaching the field of reeds, where all of his needs will be met. Books of breathing date back to the Ptolemaic era, around 305 to 300 BCE, and the Egyptian-Roman period, from 30 BCE to 640 AD. These texts are known in the archaeological world under other names, such as Breathing Permit of Hor or Hor Book of Breathing. They were basically simplified versions of the Book of the Dead and consist of several funerary writings used to ensure the deceased's survival after death. The word breathing has been used metaphorically and represents all things in this life that will be missed by the departed in the afterlife. Burial chamber was the room containing the sarcophagus of the deceased pharaoh. It wasn't the biggest place in the pyramid, but was always fully covered with incredible paintings and magical inscriptions. Their task was to protect the departed and help him on the way to the afterlife. Burial chambers were also filled with many things that could be useful after death: sculptures of the deceased's family, Shabti dolls, and colorful depictions of one's life. Canopic jars are ancient Egyptian containers used during the mummification process to store the organs of the deceased. Depending on the kingdom's period, they were made of different materials: stone, wood, pottery, or faience. The first use of these vessels dates back to the Old Kingdom. Each one of the jars depicted one of the four sons of Horus and was used to store different organs. The first one, Hapi, was assigned to store lungs and was protected by the goddess Nephthys. After that came Duamutef, protected by Neith and responsible for the stomach. The third son of Horus was Imsiti, assigned to the liver and receiving protection from Isis. The jar of the last one, Kebe-Senuef, stored intestines and was protected by the goddess Serket. The capstone, also known under the name of pyramidion, is the top of a pyramid or an obelisk, usually made of granite, limestone, sandstone, or basalt. During the Middle Kingdom period, Egyptians started to carve religious symbols and royal titles on them. Due to human activity, erosion, and the incredible amount of time that has passed, there aren't many capstones that survive till today. Fortunately, the museum in Cairo is in possession of 4 of them: the pyramidion of the Pyramid of Kenjer at Saqqara, of the Black Pyramid of Amenemhat III at Dashur, of the southern South Saqqara Pyramid, and of Mernefer I, the pyramid built possibly in the necropolis of Memphis. Cartonnage is a type of material used in ancient Egypt to create funerary masks. It was made of layers of linen or papyrus put together and then coated with another layer of plaster, which then could be painted. A mask prepared like that fulfilled not only its functional requirements, it was also a special way for ancient Egyptians to show the deceased's face for the last time and express their beliefs in an artistic way. Cartouche is an oblong or oval nameplate with hieroglyphs translating to the name of a royal individual in ancient Egypt. It was usually placed on tomb, temple, or sarcophagus of the deceased, and was not only informing about the name of a person, but also showcasing their social status and legitimacy. The oval shape of a cartouche has symbolic meaning. It represents a loop of rope, a symbol of protection from evil and chaos. Casing stones were the last layer of the pyramid's walls, created from very fine limestone, which smooth surface gave the construction that slippery effect. Ancient Egyptians used to polish the limestone too, to make it shine even brighter than the sun itself. This special kind of material could be quarried only in Tura, which mines were full of the whitest and the finest kind of limestone. The city of Tura was located south from Cairo on the eastern bank of the Nile, which makes it about 17 kilometers away from Giza. Coffin Texts are a collection of religious writings found in coffins from ancient Egypt. They date back to 2100 BCE and were partially procured from earlier pyramid texts. The difference between these two is quite simple. Pyramid texts were reserved only for pharaohs. Coffin texts, on the other hand, were available to everyone who could actually afford a coffin. The purpose of those writings was to help the deceased navigate in the afterlife and help him to get into Egyptian paradise, at the same time avoiding dying for the second time. Coffin texts included also maps, known as the Book of Two Ways, which played a role of a guide to the afterlife. There are 1,185 spells, incantations, and other forms of coffin texts altogether. Later, in the New Kingdom period, they were replaced by the Book of the Dead. Crook and Flail, accordingly known as Heka and Nekaka, are probably two of the most famous and characteristic royal items. They were extracted from the iconography of Anjati, the local god of the town Jeddu in the Nile Delta. After he was replaced by Osiris, the Crook and Flail followed the god of the underworld, who was very often depicted with both regalia crossed on his chest. Each of these items has its own meaning. Historians believe that the crook is simply a symbol of a shepherd gathering and taking care of his flock, just like the pharaoh needed to guide and protect his people. There are many theories about the flail. Some say it was used to thresh grain. There's also a hypothesis suggesting that Nekaka was a ladanistereon, a flail-like tool to collect gummy substances from plants. Whatever their previous role, the crook and flail were important royal insignia representing power, kingship, and protection of the land and its people in ancient Egypt. Crowns of ancient Egypt. Atef is a white feathered crown of the Egyptian god Osiris. It consists of the white crown of Upper Egypt and two ostrich feathers on its sides, characteristic of this particular deity and representing truth and justice. The Atef crown makes it very easy to identify Osiris in ancient paintings and carvings. Deshret is the name of the red crown of Lower Egypt. According to mythology, the earth god Geb gave the power over Lower Egypt to the god Horus. Later on, pharaohs who believed to be his descendants wore the red crown as well, as a symbol of power and authority over this region. Hedjet is a white plain crown representing Upper Egypt, often described pretty accurately as looking like a bowling pin. Shent became an official crown of ancient Egypt after the unification of the upper and lower regions by King Narmer. Both crowns, Deshret and Hedjet, became one, creating the red and white pharaonic symbol of power in the whole kingdom. The name of the double crown comes from Greek, which derived from the Egyptian word pasekemti, meaning two powerful ones. Kapresh is yet another royal headdress from ancient Egypt. It is also known as a blue crown or war helmet, but according to historians, it was worn during many ceremonies as well. Death mask, also known as a funerary mask, was an important part of rituals in ancient Egypt. The special armor put on the deceased's face played the role of protector from evil spirits, and it was supposed to help the departed soul in finding its owner. From the Middle Kingdom period, around 1938 to 1630 BCE, to the 1st century CE, it was a custom to paint masks according to the facial features of the dead. It was a way of honoring the departed. Death masks were mostly made of plaster and then painted. Those prepared for royalty and noblemen were usually covered in gold and silver. Duat is the name of the underworld or afterlife in ancient Egyptian mythology. Its geography was quite similar to the world Egyptians knew. There were roads, fields, rivers, lakes and islands, but also some fantastic features like walls of iron or lakes of fire. According to ancient beliefs, god Osiris was king of the underworld, which was home to many other deities and beasts. The soul of a deceased was traveling through the underworld, facing many challenges to ultimately reach the final destination, the Field of Reeds, the ancient Egyptian version of paradise. Heka was for Egyptians what we would call magic, although back then the meaning of the word was completely different. In the modern world, magic is often seen as a bad force, a power of destruction and evil, and it has nothing to do with religious beliefs. Ancient Egyptians, however, connected every aspect of life to their gods, and the word religion didn't exist in their language. They believed that creator gods needed Heka to accumulate enough power to design the world. Ancient Egyptian magic was associated with the creation of new life and depended on 4 components: Heka as a live force in action, Rw, which were sacred texts, Pekret as medicinal prescriptions, and Sesh or magical rituals. Nowadays, there's a huge difference between prayers, magic, and medicine, which are completely separate things for us. But for ancient Egyptians, all of these components work together. This cooperation was necessary for magic to happen. Horizon of Ra generally refers to the Akhet, which can be translated as horizon or place of becoming. The word Akhet was often used symbolically for the horizon where the sun rises and sets, believed to be the point of transition between the worlds of the living and the dead. In the context of Ra, the sun god, Horizon of Ra would symbolize the point where Ra enters the underworld during the evening and is reborn at dawn. It represents cycles of life, death, and rebirth. One of the most famous places associated with this term is the Great Pyramid of Giza, whose name was Akhet Khufu, meaning the horizon of Khufu. Here, the horizon becomes a space linked to both physical and spiritual transformation. Hypostyle Hall is the term for a building whose roof rests on columns or pillars. This architectural style was very popular in ancient Egypt and used primarily in temples and palaces. The word hypostyle, translated from Greek, literally means under the pillars. Constructions of that kind were very spacious and were used during festivals and religious ceremonies. The perfect example here is the Great Hypostyle Hall, built in the Temple of Amun-Ra at Karnak. Its columns, covered fully with hieroglyphs, paintings, and carvings, are an extraordinary work of art and a wonderful source of information about ancient Egyptian beliefs. Kohl is a flexible black paste made of a pigment and binding material, which was basically one of the first eyeliners in history. Men and women of all social classes used it on their eyelids for eye protection. According to studies, ancient Egyptians were prone to eye infections due to the strong sun, desert sand, and insects. Kohl had antibacterial properties, but there was another more meaningful purpose of using black makeup in ancient Egypt. The sky god Horus and the sun god Ra were often depicted in the form of a strongly outlined black eye, which symbolized the protection and watchfulness of both deities. Egyptians believed that eyes covered with kohl were protected from the evil eye. Not wearing makeup made one more vulnerable to curses. Thank you very much for staying with us till the end. We hope you enjoyed the first part of our lexicon. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next video.